Late at night, in the same building, Edward's baby wouldn't stop crying. The building WeChat group also exploded. Soon, Edward's landlord sent a message. Smothered immediately, I promise it won't bother anyone. After Edward sent that message, the whole group fell silent. Strangely enough, the baby's crying did indeed stop immediately. A few minutes later, a few messages began to pop up in the group. Nathan said, "No, it's the middle of the night. Don't make such a terrifying joke." Ethan also said, "That's right. Just soothe the child. Don't be sulky." Oliver was even more concerned. "Edward, neighbor, are you okay? Do you need help?" Liam seemed a bit panicked. It really went quiet all of a sudden. I can't hear anything at all. Could something really have happened? How could a child stop crying just like that? After Liam said this, everyone fell into silence again. I went completely crazy too, because I was living in the same damn building as James, on the same floor as Edward. From my limited recollection, I remember that Edward lived with a strange family of 3. The man of the house was a tall, thin, honest-looking fellow, the sort you could tell at a glance was reclusive. Even when they met, he would politely greet you and talk about his wife and his child who was not yet a year old. But it was obviously awkward small talk. I had never even seen the hostess before. Maybe I only went out for work while she was busy taking care of the children and stuck at home. A rather strange family and a rather strange husband. So when I thought about it carefully, it really was possible that he could do something extreme. But fortunately, it was a false alarm, because Ethan immediately sent another message. "Edward, don't scare us and then go to sleep on your own. If you don't explain yourself, I'm calling the police." Edward only then jumped in with a message. "Just kidding. The child's mother got up to feed him, soothed him, and he stopped crying." I finally breathed a sigh of relief. But oddly, no one in the group chatted anymore. Maybe everyone was a bit startled. I was about to put my phone down and go back to sleep when another message popped up in a different group. I clicked it open, and it was the group chat from when we first moved in and bought furniture together. Edward wasn't in it. Ethan was the one talking, as usual. "Have you noticed? Edward's place is off." Liam replied immediately. "What's wrong?" Ethan sent several messages in succession. "She cried for half an hour earlier, and the child's mother didn't breastfeed her. Besides, children aren't adults. Their cries go from strong to weak. Even after getting milk, they'll wail a few more times. Wouldn't stop abruptly." I just felt that something was wrong. There are only 8 households in this group chat. Because we moved back into stairwell apartments, we hadn't been living here long, and there weren't many people who'd moved in. The whole 6-story building has 4 units per floor, and only 10 households in total have moved in so far. Most of them are single men. On the 4th floor, there are 3 households, including mine James, the mysterious Edward and his family, and the ordinary bachelor Liam. After Ethan questioned it, Liam immediately replied, "Don't jump to conclusions. Do you really think someone would actually strangle their own son to death?" At that moment, Oliver also spoke up. "That's hard to say. A few days ago, I saw Edward's owner kill a cat." Liam seemed shocked. "Don't scare me like that." Nathan immediately retorted, "So what if he killed a cat? Does killing a cat mean he'll kill people? Besides, that was his own son." Oliver then sent several messages in quick succession to explain. "First, I didn't mean that. I meant he has a tendency toward violence. Second, his relationship with his wife doesn't seem good either, right? I've never seen them go out together. Finally, now that we're talking about it, has anyone here actually seen his wife?" That question drew the attention of the few families who were awake. I thought it over carefully. Even though we're neighbors on the same floor, I realize I've never actually seen his wife. Those awake in the group, Ethan, Liam, Nathan, all said they hadn't seen her either, and each agreed it was indeed strange. In the end, Nathan still suggested, "Why don't we call the police?" But at that moment, Ethan asked this, "Isn't calling the police with no evidence just a waste of public resources?" I had thought he was the one most eager to find out what was going on. When they were all hesitating, Liam spoke up again. "It's not that complicated. They live next door to me. I'll just go over and ask, problem solved." Ethan immediately said, "That works. Just be careful and see how he's doing." Oliver and Nathan also urged him to be as gentle as possible, to come from a place of concern rather than accusation. Seeing this, I felt more awake. Sleeping was impossible. I rolled out of bed, hopped down, and jogged to the foyer. Because there's a fire door corner outside, the peephole can't see anyone else's doorway. I didn't open the door either. I just pressed my ear to it and listened. I heard the sound of a door closing. It must be Liam coming out. He was quite polite. He didn't press Edward's doorbell, but gently knocked instead. Then, something strange happened. Between them, there was, surprisingly, no conversation at all. Edward's opening of the door was too faint for me to hear, but the sound of the door closing, I heard that loud and clear. I couldn't make sense of it. Was that it? It was over? Were they speaking so quietly I couldn't hear them? Or was there some other reason? And at that moment, a message came through the group again. Liam, there's nothing wrong at his place. We were overthinking it. Everyone go to sleep. I stared at the phone screen, stunned. I didn't hear Liam close the door when he got home. Not at all. When he left, he clearly closed the door. How could he possibly come home without opening it? Could it be that he went into Edward? At that thought, my heart jolted. And on the screen, Oliver and Nathan both said, "As long as you're okay, go to sleep, go to sleep." Only Ethan remained silent. Then I discovered he had actually sent me a private message. "Bro, you definitely aren't asleep, right? I'm often up late alone. I don't believe you could be asleep. Have you seen all the messages in the group?" I paused for a moment, but thinking about it, it made sense. Ethan is as much a loner as I am. We occasionally team up in games, both of us able to endure long hours. So I didn't hold back and replied to him. I was half asleep and didn't send any messages, but I saw them all. Hasn't it ended? I didn't dare tell him about the odd thing I had just heard. What worried me more was why he had sent me a private message. Ethan also spoke plainly to me. "Bro, don't you think something's off?" Of course I felt something was off, but I still didn't dare tell him outright, lest it stir up trouble. So I only replied, "What's wrong?" He answered quickly. He was obviously tense. "Liam, your neighbor, his last message felt off to me. Have you noticed he has a little typing quirk?" "What kind of quirk?" I hurried back in the group, scrolled up through the chat history, and looked specifically at Liam's messages. Then I realized, this guy, the way he types, he almost adds a cutesy little interjection to almost every sentence. But, after he saw Edward, that line telling everyone to go to sleep was spoken without that interjection. It sounded considerably more serious. Does this mean I didn't dare to imagine any further? Only continue replying on the phone, "Ethan, is it that character, Do you think the last message wasn't sent by him?" Just then, I suddenly heard some faint sounds outside the door, like footsteps made quieter, treading lightly. I couldn't help but press my face to the peephole. This sight chilled me to the bone, because outside the door, Edward's eerie face was actually leaning toward the peephole. I was so frightened my legs went weak, and I almost staggered. But I knew I couldn't make a sound, or the game would be up. God only knows what he did to Liam, and God only knows what he would do to me. But fortunately, I suddenly remembered that the peephole in the door was one way. In other words, when I had my eye pressed to it just now, even if he was already aiming at the outer hole, he still couldn't see me. Thinking of that, I finally let out a small sigh of relief. However, I still couldn't understand what had happened. So I mustered my courage and pressed my eye to the peephole again. But something strange happened once more. Through the peephole, I actually saw that the outside was completely empty. Edward, the male owner, had already vanished. Did he move that fast? Although everything seemed to have returned to calm, there was still something very wrong. But at that moment, I was terrified and didn't react for a while. I picked up my phone and saw on the screen, Ethan had sent several more messages. That's right, I don't think that message came from Liam. It was from the male owner, Edward. But there's no way to confirm that now. It's the middle of the night. What should we do? Shall I try calling Liam? I hurriedly texted back to him. "Don't call him, you haven't called, right?" To be honest, at that moment, the only thing I was worried about was myself. If his phone really was in Edward's hands, then if Ethan dialed, wouldn't we be exposed? Especially after everything that just happened, it felt to me that Edward must have realized something, which is why he came toward my door. It's just that I didn't post anything in the group, and I didn't make a sound, which barely kept him from picking on me. And once we're exposed, I'm the one closest to him. so I'm very likely the one who'll get the worst of it. I'd only just moved in, and I had no idea what level of impact this door could withstand. But luckily, Ethan replied to my message. You didn't call him. What's the matter? Wouldn't calling him outright confirm whether it was really him? Besides, he definitely hasn't fallen asleep yet, but unless I verify that the last message was from him, I won't be able to sleep. I exhaled softly. Good. At least I didn't call and wake him. By then, I had already decided to call the police. But to keep Ethan from doing anything rash, I decided to tell him about what had just happened. Typing out everything I just encountered actually took quite a while. And after Ethan read it, he was simply stunned. Holy shit, that's terrifying, right? I told you that message wasn't sent by Liam. I immediately replied to him. I'm going to call the police. Do not, under any circumstances, phone Liam. It's best to let the police handle this. But what I didn't expect was that Ethan would send a message like this. I already called the police. Don't run off, and whatever you do, don't be like Liam. Don't recklessly go poking around over at Edward's place. The police will contact me when they arrive. Remember, under no circumstances leave the house. Wait for my message, then we'll explain everything to the police together. I replied with a single line, okay. Only then did I begin to relax a little, because as long as the police arrived, everything would be resolved. But Ethan insisted twice that I shouldn't go out, and that finally made me realize something. I suddenly understood why I'd felt that something was off just now. Because I clearly heard Edward close a door, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw the face of Edward's male owner. The door was closed, and he was still outside, which means he hadn't actually gone back to his own room at all, right? If I go out now, wouldn't that be asking to be killed if he really has violent tendencies? Obviously, Ethan had thought of that too. But at that time, my mind was in such a mess that I didn't even suspect one other thing. Why was Ethan's thinking so clear? I went back to the living room, not daring to turn on the light, and could only slump on the sofa and wait patiently. The phone kept lighting up again. I picked it up and saw that Ethan had pulled together a small group with the still-awake Oliver, Nathan, and me. Ethan voiced his confusion, and immediately Oliver and Nathan were alerted too, both asking about what was going on. Ethan answered one by one and told them everything I had encountered, but his ultimate aim was clearly the final sentence. Don't worry, I've already called the police. We'll wait for them to handle it. The reason I'm disturbing everyone is that if the police need it, please be prepared to describe what you encountered tonight. Oliver and Nathan both said it was no problem. After all, Edward the Master saying he was going to kill his own son was already horrifying enough. On top of that, Liam Brothers' disappearance. Unless this was fully sorted out, no one would sleep well tonight. It was probably about half an hour later when the police finally arrived. But they didn't come straight up to the fourth floor because the one who called was Ethan, so the officers went to look for him first. Ethan sent a message in the group. The police are here. I'm describing the situation to him. He might come talk to you in a bit, James. I quickly replied, no problem. The main thing is to figure out what's going on at Edward's place, and also how Liam is doing now. A few minutes later, Ethan messaged, okay, he's coming down to see you. He told me not to go. He said it's not clear yet, and too many people moving around could disturb others who are sleeping. Seeing that message, I hurried to the entryway again and pressed my eye to the peephole to look outside. Unfortunately, I couldn't see Edward's door, so I could only keep listening. Then I heard the elevator doors open and close, and the sound of dress shoes on the floor. The police had arrived, but it sounded like there was only one person's footsteps. The police stopped at Edward's door and knocked. Perhaps getting no answer, he dialed a number. From the tone, it seemed he was speaking with a colleague. Use the police station's household registration system to look up the phone number of the head of household for Building X in XX community, Edward. I need it right away. And while you're at it, check Liam too. We might need that. Send it to me immediately. After several dozen seconds, he resumed speaking into his phone. Hello, are you the head of household? Edward, we received a report saying there's noise disturbing the neighborhood at your place. Are you at home? I'm right outside your door. Your child is sick? I see. There's nothing else here. I'll talk to the person who called. You guys take care of things first. He hung up, then called another number, but this time his voice was quieter. I couldn't make out what he was saying. Then the footsteps started up again, sounding closer and closer. He was coming in the direction of my house. I didn't open the door in advance. Instead, I waited and watched to see what would happen. Sure enough, he knocked on the door. I peered through the peephole and saw that the person was indeed a police officer in uniform, but his cap was pulled very low. "Someone's home. Open up immediately." I answered and was about to undo the chain, but something strange happened again. The policeman actually spoke to me through the door. "Not opening is fine too. It's late at night. To spare you any needless alarm, I'll just say a few words. Ethan, the resident said you were also puzzled by what Edward did tonight. I just cleared it up. Their child was crying because he's sick. The three of them are now at the hospital." The messages on WeChat were said in anger. There's no need to worry too much. So the child was ill after all? But something still felt off, because right after Master Edward sent that threatening WeChat, his child immediately stopped crying. Moreover, I later saw him through the peephole. How do you explain that? At the very least, it proves he definitely didn't go to the hospital, and his child wasn't quiet because they went out. It's also possible he really did strangle the child to death. If that's the case, then Liam, what about him? I don't know. So I was pretty on edge too. Since the police told me I didn't have to open the door, I really didn't. I asked through the door. Okay, then what about Liam? You should have gone talk to Edward to find out what happened. And then, he just didn't come back home? The police officer's voice, however, was very firm. He went home. I just called him too. He answered half asleep. We've confirmed he's safe, and because it was late at night, I didn't let him come out. At that moment, I began to doubt my own memory. Liam, when did he go home? I clearly didn't hear a thing at that time. The police outside continued speaking. Also, I'm the officer in charge of this precinct. If anything else comes up, just call my office cell directly. Don't dial 911. It's more time-consuming to transfer. I've already given my number to Ethan. He said he'd pass it on to you. Let's call a night. Okay, sure. Although I agreed verbally, at that moment, I felt a twinge of doubt about this officer. Why shouldn't I call 911? But the next moment, I completely changed my mind. Out of suspicion, I kept looking through the peephole. I saw the police turn away and leave. But immediately, that strange face was pressed against the peephole again. It was Edward, the male owner. I was so frightened I staggered and my legs went weak. What's going on? There's only that little patch of open ground in front of my door. Why can't the police find him? Gathering my courage, I leaned toward the peephole again. What I saw outside was even stranger, and in a way I couldn't understand at all. The policeman was waiting for the elevator, but Edward, the male owner, staggered up behind him and stared at him intently. This policeman, he had no idea? I was dumbfounded. What on earth is going on? Then the elevator doors opened, the police officer stepped in, turned, and pressed the elevator button. At this moment, he should have been face to face with the male Master Edward, but he made no move at all and calmly let the elevator doors close. It was as if he couldn't see the person now standing at the elevator door. He left just like that. I stood there dumbfounded. And then Edward, the Master, slowly turned his head. He looked in my direction again. I was so frightened I trembled all over, turned and rushed back into the room, and jumped onto the bed, shaking. I finally understood. The one who had the problem wasn't the police, but Edward, the man of the house. Judging by his expression, the police were in the dark about it too. Because he couldn't see Mr. Edward at all. He really couldn't see him at all. Is it because Mr. Edward isn't human? Or could the problem possibly be me? Could it be that I'm the only one who can see him? The more I thought about it, the more confused my mind became. And while I was going through all this, a lot of messages popped up in the group chat on my phone. To distract myself, I hurriedly opened it to take a look. Ethan told everyone the police investigation results and posted his phone number in the group. Nathan questioned why they should call the police officer's mobile, but Ethan offered a perfect explanation. I asked him too. He said that 911 is the command center. Calling them means they have to dispatch it, which takes time, but calling his office number, he can rush over immediately and handle it himself. And he doesn't have to file another report with 911. It's a win-win. With that explanation, I completely understood. The police are not the problem. The problem is Edward, the male head of the household. It was his fault from beginning to end. From the moment he sent that WeChat message about strangling his own son, it was a harbinger of all this. Ethan let everyone sleep, meaning this matter would end here. But I felt it was definitely far from over. I didn't want to face it alone either, so I immediately typed out everything strange I had just seen. When I said that, the other 3 people in the group all freaked out. Ethan fired off questions one after another. No way. Are you seeing things? How could the police not see him? Nathan was also shocked. Bro, have you taken something? You're getting more and more mystical. You're scaring me. I couldn't explain it either. I could only promise them that my personal mental state was very stable. But I really couldn't figure out what on earth had happened. Suddenly, the one who had been silent, Oliver, also sent me a private message. Bro, I think Nathan is off. Did you notice anything? I was stunned into silence again. Nathan, what's wrong? I don't feel anything at all. Oliver continued. Our balconies aren't windowed in. You can climb up and down them level by level. Did you know that? That's right, he wasn't wrong. But I still didn't understand. What do you mean? What does this have to do with Nathan? Oliver went on. Nathan and Liam have never gotten along. You might not know this, but those two have argued several times over soundproofing between floors. So I was thinking, the young man you heard knocking on Edward's door earlier, what if that person wasn't really Liam's young man? I have to say, Oliver really has a wild imagination. But there was a reason, which I only learned later, for why he would say something like that. Besides, I had no idea at all Nathan and Liam's families still had such a grudge. At the time, I didn't get the full picture either, and just replied, it wasn't Liam. Could it possibly be Nathan? To my surprise, Oliver's answer was so certain. Exactly. After Nathan knocked on the door, he ran downstairs. So he wouldn't have needed to go back to Liam, right? I was stunned again. What a wildly imaginative idea. You mean Nathan climbed up from the balcony onto Liam, and then... Oliver said, I'm only guessing too. I don't know why you saw Edward the homeowner, but about that earlier incident. If my guess is right, it's possible Nathan already killed Liam. Those words chilled me to the bone. Why did Oliver suddenly come up with such a terrifying idea? Murder? Even if it was a fight, it wouldn't come to murder, would it? Regarding Nathan, we suddenly had one more small group chat. The group was started by Oliver, so of course Nathan was excluded. It was just me and Ethan. I was still in a daze while the two of them were already talking nonstop. Calling the police again was definitely out of the question. The officers had just left. If we made another fuss, we might all have to report to the station tonight. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. If something truly strange was happening, everyone could be in danger. They went over it and boiled it down to 2 main points. First, Edward, the male head of the household. There's definitely something wrong with him. Maybe he slaughtered his own family. So the baby could have, in that instant, stopped crying altogether. And him answering the police's call could very well be because he's still at home, putting on an act. Second, Liam, the young man. It's very possible, just as Oliver said, that he has already been killed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as if he were a different person. It's just that Nathan or Edward killed him. Which of the two is not easy to tell. If there's even a tiny clue, we could call the police. The problem is, where are we supposed to find that tiny clue? Oliver actually made such a suggestion. James, brother, why don't you knock on Liam's door? Just listen for any response inside. If there's none, it means the person who answered the phone when the police called definitely wasn't him. At the same time, Ethan not only agreed to the suggestion, he even made plans for himself. Right, you go check on Liam's situation. I'll find a way to confirm what's happening inside Edward's. If Edward, the host, really did something drastic, there can't be zero trace of it. I'm going to peek down from the balcony and see if I can spot anything. Oliver immediately warned. Don't use any light or you'll be exposed in an instant. Ethan agreed. I know. I'll be careful. James, what about you? Can you go check on Liam's situation? To be honest, I was a little hesitant. The eerie scenes I had seen through the peephole had already sent chills down my spine. I wasn't very willing to open that door and step outside. What if Edward, the male owner, was waiting right at the doorway? Wouldn't that be a death sentence for me? Just as I was hesitating, I received another private message. It was Nathan's. He didn't waste words either. He went straight to say, "Have you noticed? Oliver. He seems like a different person, Liam." By then, my brain had almost stopped functioning. Oliver accused Nathan of having issues, and Nathan retorted that Oliver seemed like a different person. I hurriedly replied to him, "What do you mean? What did you notice?" Nathan's message came quickly too. Oliver used to speak very logically, using connectors like first and secondly, but after he fell silent for over half an hour, his speech lost all coherence. That's what happened after the police arrived. Indeed, Nathan, I could relate to what he said, because what Oliver had just said when questioning Nathan wasn't very convincing. It didn't at all sound like the meticulous person he used to be. So here's the question. How am I supposed to verify who of them is telling the truth and who is lying? Just then, Nathan sent more messages. "Speaking of the police, I noticed something else. You said a single officer came to your door, right? But that's against the rules. A lone police officer is not allowed to go out and enforce alone. They must go in pairs. Even one auxiliary police officer would suffice. So I want to ask you, are you sure you only saw one officer, right?" I replied, "Yes. Only one officer. I'm absolutely sure." Nathan wrote again in the messages, "Something about this is definitely fishy. I need to call the police again. And don't call that mobile number. I have a bad feeling. I'll just dial 911 myself." After that, his messages stopped. He must be calling 911. Taking advantage of the moment, I also carefully went over what had happened tonight. I suddenly remembered something off, and that was Ethan. At first, he was against calling the police. But later, it was he who personally called the police. If that cop had problems, wouldn't that mean that actually Ethan had problems too? Following that line of thought, it was Ethan who started the small group chat in the first place. After he was removed from that small group, he started the whole Baojing, calling the police drama, which went on until he posted that officer's phone number. Could it be that the point of that small group was to stop us from calling 911? Then the police who came to the door didn't make me open it, which perhaps makes some sense. Because he was fake, maybe I couldn't see through him with the door between us. But if I had opened the door and met him face to face, I might have recognized at once that he was an imposter. When I thought of that, I was already inclined to believe Nathan. After all, he really had called the police, and he dialed 110. But then the messages Nathan sent next made me unbearably anxious. Called 911, but because I couldn't give a very good reason for reporting it, the operator said they'd have a nearby patrol officer come by to check, which might take about 20 to 30 minutes. The problem is, the operator said, we haven't received any alarms from our neighborhood before this. So, don't go outside under any circumstances. Lock your door and just wait for the police. I still can't figure out what actually happened tonight. I've decided to wait. Sure enough, if Nathan wasn't lying, it matches what I suspected. Ethan is the one with the problem. He never actually called the police. That officer was fake too. No wonder his hat was pulled so low. Because the elevator lobby has cameras, he must not have wanted his face recorded. As for what exactly is going on with Edward, I can't quite figure it out either, but all these entanglements together must have a reason. However, that's all premised on Nathan not lying. What if he did lie? What if he suspected I was going to check on Liam, so he went out of his way to tell me these things with the aim of stopping me? Because at that moment, Oliver and Ethan were back in the little group chat. Urging me to go over, Liam knocked on the door. What should I do? After thinking for a long while, I decided to stay in the room. Going out was simply too dangerous. But I still played a little trick. In our small group, I said this one line. Okay, I'm going to knock on the door now. Wait for my update. Of course, I had no intention of actually going out. But I noticed that after I said that in the small group, the chat went quiet. Are they all silently waiting for my response? No, not at all. Things change in the blink of an eye. Just a few seconds later, I suddenly heard a sound coming from the balcony. Like the sound of footsteps? But how could there be footsteps on the balcony? I listened carefully for a while before I realized. It was the sound of shoes scraping against the wall. I stared intently toward the balcony, and after a long moment I noticed, in the darkness, there was actually a barely perceptible hemp rope swaying. At that moment I panicked, because I remembered Oliver's words. He said that in our building the balconies aren't enclosed by windows, that you can climb up and down them. So, Oliver climbing down just 2 floors would mean he'd be at my balcony, wouldn't he? I rushed into the kitchen and grabbed a kitchen knife. I stood at the junction of the balcony and the living room, holding the knife, but my legs couldn't stop trembling. Sure enough, someone came down along the hemp rope. He was still wearing a uniform. It looked exactly like a police officer's outfit. I understood completely. Perhaps this man was the one who had just been pretending to be a policeman. I was holding the kitchen knife, thinking whether I should rush forward and strike first. But that person, agile as ever, landed on the guardrail. In that instant, he saw me too. Although I had a weapon in my hand, I was terrified. My legs went weak with fear. But something even more unexpected happened. This thug who had fallen from the sky was strangely holding onto the rope with both hands, utterly motionless, staring at me intently. Rather than vigilant, he looked more like he was scared. That's right, he was actually scared. A few seconds later, he let out a shriek. Ghost! At the same time, his hands suddenly slipped away, and without any warning, he arched backward and fell. I was even more stunned by the sudden turn of events. He stared at me. What he saw was a ghost. No, he wasn't staring at me, but it was behind me. In that moment, I too felt it behind me. A chill. I slowly turned my head. To my astonishment, I saw once more Edward's eerie face. A terrifying face. The successive shocks left my mind blank, and I fainted instantly. When I woke up, it was already over. My house was brightly lit, and there were several police officers present. Seeing that I was unharmed, they intended to take my statement. At the same time, they told me the truth about everything that had happened tonight. It turned out that 2 ruthless villains had broken in here tonight, A and B. They heard that our place was relocation housing and assumed we were all wealthy, so they planned to make a big strike. To avoid arousing suspicion, they specifically put on security guards' uniforms to lower people's guard. They had climbed up from outside apartment type 404. Neither 204 nor 304 were occupied, so they came up empty-handed. But Edward was different. They were, if somewhat reclusive, a small family of 3 blessed with happiness. After the assailants, A and B, entered the house, they mercilessly killed everyone inside, including the infant who hadn't yet reached a year old. However, Edward's household was not wealthy, and the 2 attackers didn't find anything of value. They were dissatisfied. So he climbed back up again. That's right, the one who had been holding Ethan's phone and sending messages all along was actually the assailant. From beginning to end, it was him. That also explains why, even when the other assailant posed as a police officer and came down to investigate, Ethan never showed up. That's because the real Ethan, the master, had long since died. After robbing Ethan, the 2 thugs had originally intended to run, but Thug has suddenly discovered his phone was missing. It was his personal phone, and if the police found it, he would be completely exposed. That's also why they hesitated at Ethan. They intended to climb back to Edward to look for the phone. But at that moment, Edward let out a bizarre burst of a baby's cry. The sound so loud it woke several households. The 2 thugs were stunned, because they were certain they had completely killed the infant. Why was he still crying? They were baffled as well. All they could do was take Ethan's phone, check the group chat, and proceed one step at a time. Afterwards, Liam volunteered to go, and Edward checked things out, and the situation began to slip beyond the crook's control. And Liam, the young man, he had in fact gotten into Edward's. Because in the end, the police also found him unconscious in Edward's room. As for how he got in, no one knew. However, it was exactly Liam's sudden disappearance that left the 2 criminals at the time even more baffled. They were afraid their killing of the Edward family would be uncovered, and thought that Liam was up to some scheme. Therefore, besides trying to find the phone, they also had to figure out how to find Liam. That's why Ethan messaged me privately, even though I hadn't said a word in the group. So at that time, the police played by Thug, they wouldn't let me open the door. Besides fearing I would see through the imposture, there was another reason. Because they didn't know Liam's young man, whether he was acting with me. If he was, and he broke into my house alone, he might have been killed by us in turn. And after A, pretending to be a police officer, finished talking to me, The two thugs went straight up to the 6th floor and killed Oliver's tenant as well. Their only purpose was to secure a good position. I live with James. Nathan wasn't wrong. Oliver really had been replaced by someone else. After many probes, they finally chose to have Thug Ace sneak in through the balcony, trying to kill me and the young man Liam who was hiding with me. But unfortunately, he was so frightened by the male owner Edward that he fell straight off the building. And what about Criminal B? He fell from the building as well, because the safety rope on him was tied to the safety rope on Criminal A. He even struck Criminal A's skull head-on, hastening the deaths of both. Truly, they deserve their fate. And that's everything that happened that strange night. The only thing we couldn't explain was Edward's master. Had he turned into a ghost? Of course, nothing like that could ever appear in the police report. But at least I knew he had no intention of hurting me, because I discovered one more thing. He took Liam's phone, and the message he sent was, "He has nothing wrong at home. We worried too much. Let's all go to sleep." Why would he do this? Clearly something happened to all 3 members of his family. Something serious. He could even have used a message to tell us the truth, yet he didn't. Maybe it's because he also thought the assailant was too dangerous, so he'd rather keep us out of it. He's already suffered misfortune, so he hopes that we can be safe.